Hello, my name's Andrew, and today we're doing a first impression review of the FREET Impala. So last video we talked about the FREET Muddy, and it's a very similar barefoot hiking boot. They're both great for all terrain, super rugged terrain, but they do have a few key differences. So let's just start with the toe box. This is pretty similar. FREET usually has this kind of squared off shape. They have a nice wide toe box for toe splay. The only foot shape that it won't work for is if you have like extra wide feet, but pretty much everyone from medium to wide it's gonna work for. One of the main differences here is that it has a leather upper, whereas the Muddy just has a recycled leather upper, which is made from leather scraps. So it just has a bit different look. I think it looks a little bit more natural. There's a little more color variation, but the Impala is also waterproof. So it's been raining a lot in Rochester, New York right now. So I've been taking them through mud and puddles, and the waterproofing on these boots is excellent. And another reason for that is that it has a gusseted tongue, so you can see right there. And so you can get basically up to right here with the boot going through streams, like you're doing a stream crossing, and water is not gonna get in unless you go above that point. In terms of the back of the shoe, it goes down a little bit, it's a bit slanted. So you have this point here as well that's sculpted out so that your ankle can move a little bit more, even though it is a higher boot. I found the ankle collar to be pretty soft. You do feel the ridges just a little bit when you first start wearing the boot, but it's leather, and like any leather shoe, it gets softer over time, which is great. And it can kind of conform to the shape of your foot as well. So it's pretty soft. It is a rugged material, but it doesn't feel hard by any means. In terms of the laces, they're horizontal style, which holds really well. The laces themselves are quite rugged. And then you've got two upper eyelets here, which are really nice because you can essentially just get the boot locked in how you like down the bottom, whether it's loose or tight. And then on the top, you can just whip these off whenever you want to take the boot off, which is important for a gusseted tongue like this because it can be a little bit harder to take off. So that's always nice. On the inside of the boot, you've got a smooth leather, so it's very easy again to slide your foot straight in, especially because there's a little dip here. There's a pull tab on the back. Looking deeper into the boot, you can see that there's a waterproofing layer here, which is great because even though it has a glued sole, the waterproofing layer is also underneath that. So if you ever get any separation, it's not gonna compromise the waterproofing. And if you do get separation with any glued sole boot, I would, as soon as you see any cracks anywhere, I would immediately treat it with something like shoe goo or any kind of shoe glue type product, because once it starts to open up, it can be a lot harder to fix it. But when it's just a little separation, it's pretty easy to fix the problem. Just in terms of the pros and cons of a glued sole, if you have a stitched sole, obviously water can get in there. And if you have a glued sole, it's a lot more watertight, but like I said, it can open up after a year or two. And so one of the ways you can prevent that, or another way you can prevent that, is just by making sure you dry your boots out. Like, don't leave them wet, wipe them off when you come back, especially if it's really muddy and nasty, because the water can get in there and deteriorate the glue a bit. In terms of the sole, it's 7.5 millimeters, so it's definitely a very beefy sole. It's got some good amount of vertical flex, and then not as much horizontal flex, and that's mostly because the lugs are so aggressive and wide. And there's always pros and cons to that. So with a boot like this, it's excellent for going backpacking on a really, really rugged terrain where your feet could get beat up. And on the Impala, compared to the Muddy, it's actually got these little nibs here as well, which provides even more grip. They will wear down over time, but especially the first couple of years that you have the boot, like going on rocks, shifting rocks, wet rocks, anything like that, this stuff really grips. And the rubber itself is also quite grippy. You can see that when I pull my finger on it, it really holds well. And then in the front and the back, you've got these really dense panels. This is one of the things that limits the flexibility of the boot a little bit more because the lugs are just so wide. And again, pros and cons, like this is the type of boot where you can just do absolutely anything to it. You can beat the living tar out of it and it's just gonna keep going, and it's gonna take it a very long time to wear down. You're talking probably 5 years at least with this boot, unless you're just doing crazy backpacking every single day. But yeah, you have the same thing in the back. So when your heel is coming down, you're going downhill, this takes a lot of the wear that could happen with the boot. And then same thing in the front when you're stubbing your toe on sharp rocks and any kind of terrain like that. It just adds an extra layer of protection and durability. Finally, in terms of temperature range, I would say you can wear the Impala up to like 70 degrees Fahrenheit. If you get above that, it is a waterproof boot, so your feet could start get a little bit sweaty. But one way that you can deal with that is I like wearing Injinji merino wool toe socks because it spreads your toes out and it creates some airflow in there so your feet aren't getting as sweaty. And then merino wool is just one of the most breathable, temperature regulating, moisture wicking fabrics on earth. And it's really good for longer backpacking trips or just regular hikes, whether it's hot or cold. And FREET also gives you a removable insole. So this is just a very thin ortholite insole. If you're going on really rugged terrain, you just want some padding. And also because the lugs are a little bit harder, adding some padding inside the boot can help too. Another option would be a wool felt insole. I really like these for winter because they warm the boot up, and also like merino wool socks, they're really breathable. So that's another good option, and it doesn't take up quite as much room in the boot. So if you have any other if you ever have problems with high volume issues, then yeah, it just gives you a little more room. But actually the Impala has quite an amount of room here compared to some other boots where they're a little more thin in the front of the shoe, so that's great. Okay, and then one last thing, in terms of how it feels on roads, the tread is fine. I mean, it's a little bit flatter, so it rolls and it wears perfectly fine on even rough pavement, but it just feels like overkill, and it can even feel like overkill just going on like a casual walk on a trail because you really don't need this much protection. And when you have thicker lugs like this, like I said, it does limit flexibility, which is a little less natural in terms of your stride. So I definitely think it's a boot that's meant for more extreme terrain. In terms of alternatives, like we said, the FREET Muddy is a very similar boot. It's just a little bit lower cut, but it has that same slant and then little dip in the back for extra more mobility. And then it has a wide toe box as well. I think that Impala has just a little bit more room, but they're very similar. And then in terms of the leather, it's also waterproof, but it uses recycled leather. So essentially they take leather scraps and then they bind them together. So you get a little bit more uniform type color, but then you've got a gusseted tongue as well. The same kind of soft leather here that you can just easily slip your way into. And then just a little different lacing system here. You've got metal grommets instead of the leather ones, which they both work really well. They hold, the laces are pretty beefy, so they don't slip going through here. And like with the Impala, you kind of just set it up once and then you just use the quick laces at the top to take it on and off. So yeah, it also has a 7.5mm sole. The lugs aren't quite as deep, but they're also pretty flat and wide like the Impala. And it's got a moderate amount of flex, but again, this is a boot that you want to use for super rugged terrain, as opposed to something that's a little more flexible that you would use for casual walks. If you want a vegan option, this is the Vivo Barefoot Tracker Textile, and this is a similar type of boot. It's got a mid-cut, so fairly high, but then also dips in the back. Has a really nice, soft, comfortable ankle, which I like the feeling of. And in terms of the laces, this has got more of a fabric type vegan lace, but again, the laces are quite beefy. They hold, I've never had any issues. You've got the same thing with the quick release up top, a gusseted tongue as well, and then waterproof layer inside. It's really hard to see because the boot is black, so it's like looking into a black hole. But yeah, it does have one extra security strap here if you're just looking for a little bit more security up on the top of the boot. And in terms of the width, it's definitely wide. It gets just a little bit more narrow than FREET in the front, but yeah, pretty generous overall. Although it does have a slightly softer feel than a thicker leather boot. So like I said, a little bit more agile. And then in terms of the sole, it's a 7mm sole, so it is a little bit more flexible, as you can see. And then the lugs are kind of like medium wide, and they're spaced so that they work well on both roads and trails, firm ground and soft ground. Especially when you bend it, it really opens up the boot. They're good for going down muddy hills. And because the lugs are angled, I find the mud comes out of it a little bit better than like a more aggressive talon-like type tread, where the lugs are a little bit deeper and more squared off. So yeah, I would say it's kind of like 66% soft ground and 33% firm grounds. If you take it on pavement, it actually feels really great walking, especially because the sole is more flexible. So this is an option that you could use for more casual use, as well as hiking and maybe some light backpacking. But because there is less surface area, these lugs could wear down a little bit faster. Finally, we've got the Vivo Barefoot Tracker FG, and this is pretty similar to the Tracker Textile, except it has a leather upper. I think this is my favorite color of any barefoot boot. I just love the kind of like rusty brown. And as as you can see, I really put it through the ringer in terms of disgusting muddy conditions. Again, the toe box is nice and wide, but it does get a little bit more slim towards the front compared to FREET, which is more squared off. And then you've got metal lugs for the laces. Again, a pretty beefy lace here, which holds really well. And similar to the tracker, you've got that extra security right here. And then 2 quick lace loops at the top. And also similar padded ankle, which I find to be really comfortable, that kind of slants in the back as well for some extra mobility. And then a really nice pull tab, which is always good. Inside it is insulated like the textile, so all 4 of these boots are meant for more cool weather. You can wear them in hotter conditions, but your feet probably will get a bit sweaty. In terms of temperature range, I think they're all similar in that you can get down to maybe about 10 degrees, depending on whether you add some wool toe socks and maybe a wool felt insole. You might even be able to get down to 0 degrees. And that's true for pretty much any waterproof boot that has a more thick upper, like the tracker does. In terms of the sole, this is one difference between the textile. It's a 5.5 millimeter sole, so this is the thinnest of the 4 boots that we've looked at. And then it's got the original FG sole, and these are a little bit closer together. So it's really great for firm ground, and like the textile, it's got a mix of terrain that you can do. So I'd say this is like 66% firm ground and 33% soft ground. So you can use it on muddy conditions, but as you can see, the lugs are pretty close together and they're pretty flat. So especially as you start to wear the boot down, it's not gonna be as great for going down really slick, muddy hills. In the same ways the tracker textile would be, because the lugs are just a little bit deeper, or the 2 FREET boots. All right, so that's my first impression review of the FREET Impala and Friends, but if you'd like to support the channel, you can shop with the referral links down below, browse and filter more products with the shoe finder tool at my website barefootwear.org, or watch my 0-drop transition video to learn more about barefooting. Finally, if you have a question about the FREET Impala or about barefoot shoes in general, let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching, catch you next time, peace.